Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Mitchell, and I need to share something that completely shattered my understanding of family loyalty. 3 weeks ago, I woke up to a WhatsApp message that changed everything. My childhood home had burned down while my parents and brother were inside. When I frantically called to make sure everyone was safe, my father's response was colder than I ever imagined possible. He told me it wasn't my problem anymore, that I had made my choice when I moved out. But here's the thing about family emergencies. They reveal who people really are when the masks come off. What I discovered next wasn't just about a house fire. It was about years of resentment, manipulation, an insurance policy that somehow had my name all over it, even though I hadn't lived there in 6 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notification sound pierced through my sleep at 4:37 in the morning. I always kept my phone on silent except for family contacts, a habit I developed after moving to Phoenix for work. The glowing screen showed 17 missed messages in our family WhatsApp group, all sent within the past 2 hours. My heart immediately started racing because in my family, mass texting in the middle of the night only meant one thing: something terrible had happened. The first message was from Tyler, my older brother, and it was just 2 words that made my blood freeze. House gone. Then Jessica had replied with crying emojis and "Oh my God, Tyler, are you serious right now?" Mom had sent a blurry photo that took me several seconds to understand. It was supposed to be our family home in Glendale, but all I could see were flames shooting through what used to be the living room window and thick black smoke billowing against the dark Arizona sky. I sat up so fast that my head spun, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the rest of the messages. Tyler again, fire department here. Started in kitchen. We got out but everything's gone. Jessica, where are you guys staying? Are you hurt? Mom, Tyler's truck, hotel tomorrow maybe. Don't know yet. The timestamps showed this conversation had been going on for almost 3 hours. 3 hours and no one had called me directly. I immediately tried calling Dad's cell phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen as I paced around my downtown apartment. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Mom next, same thing. Tyler's phone rang twice before he picked up, and I could hear sirens and shouting in the background. Tyler, thank God, are you okay? Is everyone safe? What happened? The words tumbled out of me in a rush. Yeah, we're fine, he said, his voice flat and tired. Fire started around midnight. Kitchen electrical thing, they think. Pretty much everything's gone though. Where's Dad? Where's Mom? I tried calling them but they're talking to the fire chief or insurance guy or something. Look, Sarah, it's been a long night. We're handling it. Something in his tone made me pause. It wasn't just exhaustion. There was something else, something distant and almost dismissive. Tyler, I'm coming down there. I can be there in 30 minutes. Do you need anything? Clothes, a place to stay, money for? Don't. The word came out sharp and final. Don't come down here, Sarah. We don't need you making this about yourself. I stood there in my pajamas, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what he had just said. Making this about myself? Tyler, your house just burned down. Our childhood home is gone. How is wanting to help making this about myself? Because that's what you do. You swoop in with your fancy job and your downtown apartment and act like you're saving everyone. We're adults, Sarah. We can handle our own problems. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, completely bewildered. I had called because I was terrified that my family might be hurt or homeless, and somehow I was the problem. I tried calling back, but Tyler had turned his phone off. I walked to my kitchen and made coffee with shaking hands, not because I needed caffeine, but because I needed something to do with the nervous energy that was making my chest feel tight. Through my apartment window, I could see the Phoenix skyline starting to lighten with the early morning sun. Somewhere 20 minutes south of here, my family was dealing with the worst night of their lives, and I had just been told to stay away. The WhatsApp group had gone quiet after Tyler's last message. I kept refreshing it, hoping for updates, some sign that everyone was really okay, maybe even an indication that Tyler had just been stressed and didn't mean what he said. Instead, I watched the little indicators show that Mom and Jessica had both read my messages asking if everyone was safe, but neither of them replied. Around 6 in the morning, I finally saw Dad come online. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times, like he was typing and deleting messages. Finally, a single message appeared: house is total loss. Insurance adjuster coming today. We're fine. I immediately typed back, Dad, I'm so sorry. Do you need help with anything? I can take time off work, help you find temporary housing, whatever you need. The response came faster than I expected, and it hit me like a physical blow. Not your problem anymore, Sarah. You made it clear you don't want to be part of this family when you moved out and stopped visiting. Handle your own life, we'll handle ours. I read that message 3 times, each time hoping I had misunderstood something. But there it was, in black and white from my own father. Apparently moving out at 22 to start my career and build my own life meant I had abandoned them. Apparently not visiting every single weekend meant I didn't care. And apparently offering to help during the worst crisis they'd ever faced meant I was overstepping boundaries I didn't even know existed. Jessica finally responded an hour later, but not to me directly. She replied to Dad's message, "You're right, Dad. We've always taken care of each other. We don't need outside help." The phrase outside help felt like a knife between my ribs. I wasn't outside help. I was their daughter, their sister, or at least I thought I was. I called in sick to work and spent the morning refreshing news websites, looking for any information about the fire. I found a small article in the Arizona Republic with a photo that made my stomach drop. The house I grew up in, where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway and had birthday parties in the backyard, was nothing but a blackened shell. The roof had collapsed, the windows were blown out, and everything that had once been our life together was just ash and twisted metal. But what bothered me more than seeing the destruction was reading the article and realizing that none of my family had thought to call me directly. I had found out about the fire, the same way strangers reading the local news had found out about it. Tyler had posted in the family group chat like he was announcing a minor inconvenience, not a life-changing disaster. Around noon, my phone rang, and for a moment I felt relief when I saw insurance on the caller ID. Maybe this was someone calling to coordinate with family members. Maybe there would be some way I could help from a distance if my physical presence wasn't wanted. "Hello, is this Sarah Mitchell?" The man's voice was professional but warm. "Yes, this is Sarah." "Hi Sarah, this is Mark Henderson, from State Farm. I'm calling about the fire claim for the property on Maple Street in Glendale. I have you listed as the primary contact for the policy." I paused, confused. "I'm sorry, I think there might be a mistake. That's my parent."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Parents' house. I haven't lived there in 6 years. Well, according to our records, you're listed as the primary policyholder and emergency contact. The policy payments have been coming from an account with your name on it since 2019. Were you not aware of this arrangement? The room suddenly felt very cold. No, I was not aware of this arrangement. Can you tell me more about what you mean by primary policyholder? Of course, let me pull up the details here. Okay, so the policy was originally in Robert Mitchell's name, but in March of 2019, it was transferred to your name. You're listed as the owner of the policy, and the responsible party for all claims and payments. The monthly premiums have been automatically deducted from a bank account ending in 4721. Does that sound familiar? It did sound familiar. Account ending in 4721 was my checking account. But I had never authorized any insurance payments for my parents' house. I remembered helping them out with a few bills during a rough patch in 2019, when Dad had been laid off from his construction job for several months. I had given them temporary access to my account to help with utilities and groceries until he found work again. But I had specifically been told that was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. Henderson, can you tell me exactly how much has been paid out of my account for this insurance policy? Certainly, let me calculate that for you. From March 2019 until now, the total would be approximately $8,400. I sat down heavily on my couch. $8,000. Over 4 years, I had been unknowingly paying for insurance on a house I didn't live in. For a family who had just told me I wasn't their problem anymore. Mr. Henderson, I need to understand something. If I'm the primary policyholder, what does that mean for the claim process? Well, since it's your policy, you would be the one working directly with our adjusters to determine the payout amount and how the settlement funds are distributed. The claim would be paid to you as the policyholder, and then you would handle distributing those funds for rebuilding or whatever the family decides to do. The irony was so bitter I almost laughed. The family that had just told me to stay out of their business, that I wasn't their problem anymore, had been using my money and my credit for years to pay for insurance they apparently didn't even know I was paying for. And now, the only way they were going to get any money to rebuild their lives was through me, the daughter they had just rejected. Mr. Henderson, I think I need to understand exactly what my options are here. This is a complicated family situation. I understand, Sarah. These situations can be challenging. What I'd recommend is that you come in tomorrow, so we can go over all the policy details and discuss how you'd like to proceed with the claim. I have to tell you, though, that time is somewhat important here. We need to get the claim process started as soon as possible to prevent any delays in settlement. After I hung up with Mark, I sat in my apartment for a long time, just staring at the WhatsApp group chat where my family was continuing to make plans and share updates, as if I didn't exist. Tyler had posted photos of them shopping for temporary clothes at Walmart. Jessica had shared information about an extended stay hotel that offered weekly rates. Mom had sent a message about the Red Cross offering disaster assistance, but none of them knew that every bit of help they were going to receive, every dollar they would get to rebuild, was going to come through me. The daughter who apparently didn't matter anymore was the only thing standing between them and financial ruin. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app, something I probably should have done more carefully over the past few years. There it was, clear as day, State Farm Insurance Auto Pay, for $175.50, deducted on the same day every month for the past 4.5 years. I scrolled through the transaction history, doing quick math in my head. The insurance agent had been right. I had paid over $8,000 for a policy I didn't know I had, on a house I didn't live in, for people who had just told me I was no longer their family. But that wasn't even the part that hurt the most. The part that made my chest ache was the realization that my family had no idea. They thought they were handling everything themselves, being independent and strong. They had no clue that their safety net, their security, their ability to recover from this disaster, had been quietly funded by the daughter they were now pushing away. I found myself wondering how many other things I had been unknowingly paying for over the years. How many times had they used that temporary access to my account? How many emergencies had been solved with my money, while I thought I was just helping out occasionally when they asked? That evening, I did something I had never done before. I went through every single bank statement for the past 5 years, line by line, looking for anything I didn't recognize. What I found made me feel sick to my stomach. It wasn't just the insurance. There were utility payments, car repair bills, medical co-pays, and dozens of other charges that I had never authorized and had never been told about. I had been unknowingly supporting my family for years, and the moment they faced their biggest crisis, they told me I wasn't their problem anymore. But their problem had been mine all along, whether I knew it or not. As I sat there surrounded by bank statements and calculator receipts, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Tomorrow, I had a choice to make. I could walk into that insurance office and handle their claim like nothing had happened, continuing to be the safety net they didn't know they had. Or I could finally tell them the truth about who had really been taking care of them all these years. The family that had just disowned me was about to discover that their independence had been an illusion, and their recovery was entirely in the hands of the daughter they had just rejected. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. The next morning, I drove to the State Farm office in Scottsdale, with a folder full of bank statements and a growing sense of dread in my stomach. I had barely slept, spending most of the night going through financial records and trying to piece together exactly how long this had been happening. The deeper I dug, the more confused and angry I became. This wasn't just about insurance payments. There were patterns everywhere, small charges that I had dismissed as banking errors, or forgotten subscriptions, but when I looked at them all together, they painted a picture I didn't want to see. Mark Henderson turned out to be a middle-aged man, with kind eyes, and the sort of patient demeanor that probably came from years of dealing with people during the worst moments of their lives. His office was small but organized, with certificates on the wall, and a coffee maker that smelled like it had been brewing since dawn. He offered me a cup, which I accepted gratefully, mostly because it gave me something to do with my hands, while I tried to figure out how to explain my situation. "Sarah, I'm glad you could come in so quickly," he said, settling into his chair, with a thick file folder. "I know this must be overwhelming, especially with the family dynamics you mentioned yesterday. Why don't we start by going over exactly what your policy covers and what the claim process will look like?" I nodded. But before he could continue, I interrupted. Mr. Henderson, I need to ask you something first. When this policy was transferred to my name in 2019, what kind of documentation was required? I mean, how did this happen without me knowing about it? Mark opened the file and flipped through several pages before finding what he was looking for. Well, according to our records, we received a signed authorization form with your signature, along with banking information, to set up the automatic payments. The form indicated that you were taking over financial responsibility for the property due to your parents' temporary financial hardship. Can I see that form? He hesitated for a moment, then turned his computer screen toward me. There it was, my signature, clear as day, on a State Farm document dated March 15, 2019. But as I stared at it, something felt wrong. The signature looked like mine, but I had absolutely no memory of signing anything related to home insurance. I remembered that period clearly because it had been a stressful time at work, and I had been very careful about every financial decision I made. Mr. Henderson, is there any other documentation? Like, did someone come in person to handle this training? Let me check the notes here. He clicked through several screens, squinting at his monitor. Yes, actually. It shows that Robert Mitchell came in with the signed authorization, and your banking. He explained that you were unable to come in person due to work commitments, but that you wanted to help the family during a difficult time. The coffee in my mouth suddenly tasted bitter. Dad had gone to the insurance office with my signature on a document I had never seen, and transferred their entire home insurance policy to my name. And I had been paying for it ever since, completely unaware. Mr. Henderson, I need to be completely honest with you. I never signed that document. And I never authorized this transfer. I think my signature may have been forged. The expression on his face shifted from professional politeness to serious concern. Sarah, that's a very serious allegation. If what you're saying is true, this would constitute insurance fraud. Are you certain you never signed anything related to this policy? I spent the next hour going through every detail I could remember from March 2019. I told him about helping my parents with their bills, about giving them temporary access to my bank account, about specifically being told it was just until Dad found work again. I showed him my bank statements, pointing out that while I had been expecting to help with groceries and utilities for a few months, the insurance payments had continued long after Dad went back to work. Mark took detailed notes and made several phone calls to what I assumed were supervisors or fraud investigators. Finally, he turned back to me with a grave expression. Sarah, I'm going to be completely frank with you. If your signature was forged, that's a felony. It's also insurance fraud, which is a federal crime. However, there's another complication here. Regardless of how this policy came to be in your name, you've been making payments on it for over 4 years. From a legal standpoint, you could be considered to have ratified the policy through your continued payments, even if you weren't initially aware of them. What does that mean exactly? It means that even if the original signature was forged, the fact that you've been paying the premiums could be interpreted as accepting responsibility for the policy. It's complicated, and honestly, you're probably going to need legal advice to sort this out properly. I felt like the walls of the small office were closing in on me. Not only had my family apparently committed fraud using my identity, but I might be legally responsible for it anyway, because I hadn't been paying close enough attention to my own bank account. Henderson, what happens with the claim? I mean, the house really did burn down. My family really does need help, but this whole situation is... I understand, Sarah. Here's what I can tell you about the claim itself. The preliminary estimate for the total loss is around $240,000. That includes the structure, contents, and additional living expenses while they find permanent housing. However, given what you've just told me about the policy, I'm going to have to flag this claim for investigation before we can proceed with any payments. $240,000. I sat back in my chair, trying to process that number. My family was expecting to receive nearly $250,000 from an insurance policy they didn't know I had been paying for, using a signature I didn't remember giving. How long does an investigation take? It depends on the complexity, but typically anywhere from 30 to 90 days. During that time, your family won't receive any claim payment. I'm sorry, Sarah, but given the potential fraud issue, we don't have a choice. I drove home from the insurance office, feeling like I was living in someone else's life. Everything I thought I understood about my relationship with my family had been turned upside down in the space. They had told me I wasn't their problem anymore, but apparently I had been their financial solution for years, without even knowing it. When I got back to my apartment, I found 3 missed calls from Tyler, and a string of angry messages in the WhatsApp group. Apparently, the insurance company had already contacted them to let them know there would be delays in processing their claim due to documentation issues that needed to be resolved with the primary policyholder. Tyler's message was blunt. Sarah, what did you do? Insurance company is saying there's some problem with the claim, and they need to talk to you. We told them we don't even talk to you anymore, but they said you're listed as the policy owner. What the hell is going on? For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a small surge of power. They wanted to know what was going on. They were about to find out exactly what had been going on for the past 4 years. I typed a message in the group chat. We need to talk. All of us. Tonight. Dad's response came quickly. We told you yesterday, Sarah. We don't need your help. Whatever game you're playing with the insurance company, just stop. This isn't a game, Dad. The insurance policy for the house has been in my name since 2019. I've been paying for it with my own money for over 4 years. If you want to see any claim money, we need to discuss how that happened. The group chat went completely silent. For almost an hour, I could see that everyone had read the message, but no one responded. Finally, Jessica sent a private message just to me. Sarah, what are you talking about? Mom and Dad have been paying for insurance themselves. Are you having some kind of breakdown? I screenshot my bank statements showing the monthly State Farm payments and sent them to her. Then I called her directly. Jess, I need you to look at what I just sent you. I'm looking at it. But I don't understand. These are your bank statements. Why would your bank statements show payments for Mom and Dad's insurance? Because I've been paying for their insurance for over 4 years. And I didn't know about it until yesterday. There was a long pause. Sarah, that doesn't make sense. How could you be paying for something without knowing about it? I explained everything. The forged signature, the policy transfer, the automatic payments that I had somehow missed among all my other monthly expenses. I told her about my meeting with Mark Henderson, about the fraud investigation, about the fact that the claim was now on hold indefinitely. Oh my God, she whispered. Sarah, I had no idea. None of us knew. Mom and Dad always said they were handling the insurance themselves. Jess, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has this happened before? Have there been other times when Mom or Dad used my bank account information for things I didn't know about? Another long pause. I don't know, Sarah. They've been struggling financially for a while. Tyler hasn't been working, and Mom's hours got cut back last year. But I thought they were managing okay. When was the last time any of you actually saw an insurance bill or payment confirmation? I don't know. I don't live there anymore, so I wouldn't see their mail. But now that you mention it, I don't think I've ever heard them complaining about insurance costs, and they complain about everything else that's expensive. That evening, I drove to the extended stay hotel, where my family was temporarily living. I had called ahead and insisted that we all meet in person to discuss the insurance situation. Dad had been resistant, but when I explained that the claim was on hold and wouldn't be processed until we resolved the documentation issues, he had grudgingly agreed. The hotel was one of those places that caters to people in transition, with small suites that include tiny kitchenettes and furniture that's designed to be functional rather than comfortable. I found their room on the 3rd floor, and knocked softly. Tyler opened the door, and for a moment we just looked at each other. I hadn't seen him in person in almost a year, and he looked older, more tired than I remembered. Behind him I could see Mom and Dad sitting on opposite ends of a small couch, and Jessica perched on a chair near the window. Come in, Tyler said quietly. But Sarah, I want you to know that we still don't think this is your business. We're only doing this because the insurance company is being difficult. I sat down across from my parents, my folder of bank statements and insurance documents in my lap. The room felt tense and small, filled with years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings. Dad, I began, looking directly at him. I need you to explain to me how my signature ended up on an insurance policy transfer document that I never signed. His face immediately flushed red, and he looked away. Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about. You said you wanted to help us during that rough patch. You gave us access to your account. I gave you access to help with groceries and utilities for a few months. I never authorized you to transfer your insurance policy to my name. And I certainly never signed any documents giving you permission to do that. Mom finally spoke up, her voice defensive. Sarah, you're busy with your job and your new life. We didn't want to bother you with paperwork. You said you wanted to help. Mom, forging someone's signature is a felony. It's fraud. Do you understand that? The insurance company has already started an investigation. And if they determine that Dad forged my signature, he could go to prison. The room went completely silent. Jessica looked back and forth between our parents and me. Her face pale. Tyler sat down heavily on the bed, running his hands through his hair. Prison, Dad's voice came out as barely a whisper. Yes, Dad. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I've been paying $8,000 over the past 4 years, for insurance on a house I don't live in, for a family that just told me I'm not their problem anymore. I opened my folder and pulled out the bank statements, spreading them across the small coffee table. These are my bank statements going back 5 years. Every month, $175 has been automatically deducted from my account for State Farm insurance. I thought I was helping you with groceries for a few months in 2019. Instead, I've been unknowingly paying for your home insurance for over 4 years. Mom reached for one of the statements, her hands shaking slightly. Sarah, we didn't know. We thought we were paying for it ourselves. How did you think you were paying for it, Mom? Did you ever see a bill? Did you ever write a check, or set up automatic payments from your own account? She looked at Dad, confusion clear on her face. Bob, you always handled the insurance. You said you had it taken care of. Dad's face had gone from red to pale, and he was staring at the bank statements like they were written. I thought the insurance company was just taking longer to start billing us after we got back on our feet. When the bills never came, I figured maybe we had a grace period or something. For 4 years, Dad, you thought you had a 4-year grace period on your home insurance. Tyler suddenly stood up from the bed. Wait a minute. Sarah, are you saying that Mom and Dad have been living in a house with no insurance payments coming out of their own money for 4 years? That they've essentially been getting free insurance this whole time? That's exactly what I'm saying. Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. Oh my God. Sarah, how much money are we talking about total?
The math several times, but I pulled out my calculator anyway. Over 4 years, approximately $8,400. But that's just the insurance. When I started looking more carefully at my bank statements, I found other charges too. Utility payments, car registrations, medical copays, things I never authorized and never knew about. The room erupted in chaos. Mom started crying. Dad started shouting about how he had never meant for this to happen. Tyler was pacing back and forth, swearing under his breath, and Jessica was asking rapid-fire questions about what this meant for the insurance claim. In the middle of all the noise, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had been the one trying to keep the peace, trying to smooth over family conflicts, trying to make everyone happy. But sitting in that cramped hotel room, watching my family fall apart over the revelation that they had been living off my money without even knowing it, I realized that I was done being the family peacekeeper. Stop, I said quietly, but something in my tone made everyone freeze. Just stop. All of you. I stood up and looked around the room at my family. Here's what's going to happen. The insurance company has flagged the claim for investigation because of the forged signature. That means you're not getting any money for probably 2 to 3 months, maybe longer. When the investigation is complete, if they determine that fraud was committed, Dad could face criminal charges. Dad started to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Even if the investigation clears the fraud issue, the claim will be paid to me, not to you, because I'm the policyholder. Which means that if you want to see any of that money, you're going to have to convince me to give it to you. Mom wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger or hurt or even disappointment. It was fear. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying that the daughter you told wasn't your problem anymore is the only thing standing between you and financial ruin. The family that can handle their own problems has been getting help from me for 4 years without even knowing it. And now you need to decide whether you want to keep pretending that you don't need me, or whether you want to acknowledge what's really been happening here. I gathered up my bank statements and put them back in the folder. I'm going home now. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about our relationship and about how this financial arrangement is going to work going forward, you can call me. But I'm done pretending that I'm not part of this family when it's convenient for you and then getting pushed away when you want to feel independent. I walked toward the door, but Tyler's voice stopped me. Sarah, wait. What if we had known? About the insurance, I mean. Would that have changed anything? I turned back to look at him. Tyler, yesterday morning, when I found out your house had burned down, I was ready to do anything to help. I was ready to take time off work, to give you money, to let you stay in my apartment, whatever you needed. And you told me not to come because I would just make it about myself. So no, I don't think knowing about the insurance would have changed anything. You still would have pushed me away, and I still would have been secretly supporting you without getting any credit for it. As I drove home through the desert night, I thought about something Mark Henderson had said during our meeting. He had mentioned that I could be considered to have ratified the insurance policy through my continued payments, even if I hadn't originally authorized it. In legal terms, that meant I had accepted responsibility for something I didn't know I was responsible for. But maybe that was a perfect metaphor for my entire relationship with my family. For years I had been accepting responsibility for their problems, their emotions, their financial stability, without even realizing I was doing it. I had been quietly supporting them while they maintained the illusion that they were independent and self-sufficient. The question now was whether I wanted to continue accepting that responsibility, or whether it was time to make them face the reality of what their independence actually cost. The next 3 days passed in relative silence from my family, which honestly felt like a relief after the emotional chaos of our hotel room confrontation. I went to work, attended meetings, responded to emails, and tried to maintain some sense of normalcy while my personal life felt like it was imploding. But on Thursday morning, I received a text from Jessica that changed everything. Sarah, you need to see this. Mom posted something on Facebook about the fire. I immediately logged into Facebook and found the post Jessica was referring to. Mom had shared several photos of the burned house along with a lengthy caption that made my blood pressure spike with every word I read. The post described their tragic loss and talked about how they were struggling to rebuild their lives with no help from anyone. She wrote about the insurance company being difficult and unsympathetic and mentioned that they were completely on their own during this devastating time. But the part that really got to me was near the end. Some people in our family have chosen their own success over helping loved ones in need. We've learned who our real friends are during this crisis. The people who truly care about us have stepped up, while others have turned their backs when we needed them most. The post already had dozens of comments from neighbors, church friends, and extended family members expressing sympathy and offering help. Several people had specifically asked about me, wondering why I wasn't mentioned and if I was okay. Mom had responded to those comments with variations of Sarah has her own life now and doesn't want to be involved in family problems. I screenshot the entire post and its comments, then called Jessica immediately. Did you see what she wrote? I asked as soon as she picked up. I saw it, Sarah. I don't know why she posted that. It's not fair, and it's not true. Jessica, she's telling everyone that I abandoned the family during their crisis. She's making me look like a selfish daughter who turned her back on her parents when they needed help most. But I'm literally the one who's been paying for their insurance for 4 years. I know, Sarah. I've been thinking about what you told us at the hotel, and I've been looking back at things differently. Like I remember Dad always being vague when anyone asked about insurance or bills. And now that I think about it, they never seemed stressed about money the way Tyler and I are with our own bills. Jessica's observation hit me harder than I expected. She was right. While Tyler struggled with unemployment and she worried about daycare costs for her kids, our parents had always seemed surprisingly calm about their finances for people living on Dad's sporadic construction income and Mom's part-time retail job. Jess, can I ask you something? Have Mom or Dad ever asked you for money? Like for specific bills or emergencies? There was a pause. Not really, no. I mean, they'll make comments about things being expensive, but they've never actually asked me to help pay for anything. I always assumed it was because they knew I was struggling too. What about Tyler? Same thing. Actually, Tyler has borrowed money from them a few times when he was between jobs. Which now seems really weird if they were supposedly struggling financially. After hanging up with Jessica, I sat at my kitchen table staring at Mom's Facebook post. The unfairness of it burned in my chest like acid. I had been secretly supporting them for years, and now I was being publicly shamed for not supporting them enough. The family that had benefited from my money without knowing it was now painting me as the selfish one who had abandoned them. I started typing a response to the post several times, but each draft felt either too angry or too revealing. How do you explain in a Facebook comment that you've been unknowingly paying your family's insurance for 4 years through what was essentially fraud? How do you defend yourself against accusations of abandonment when the full truth would destroy your parents' reputation in their small community? Instead, I decided to call Amy Chen, my coworker and closest friend. Amy was practical, level-headed, and had no emotional investment in my family drama, which made her the perfect person to help me think through this rationally. "Sarah, this is insane," Amy said after I explained the situation. "Your mom is basically committing defamation on social media while simultaneously benefiting from insurance fraud. Do you realize how legally problematic this is?" "I know it's bad, Amy, but I don't know what to do about it. If I defend myself publicly, I have to explain about the insurance situation, which would basically be accusing my dad of fraud on Facebook." "Sarah, your dad did commit fraud. He forged your signature and has been stealing from your bank account for 4 years. The fact that your family didn't know about it doesn't make it less illegal." Amy had a point, but family dynamics aren't governed by legal logic. These were still my parents, people I had loved and trusted my entire life. The idea of publicly accusing them of crimes felt impossible, even if those accusations were true. "What would you do if you were me?" "Honestly, I'd screenshot everything, document all the financial theft, and let a lawyer handle it. But I also don't have the emotional history with these people that you do. What I will say is that you can't let them control the narrative while you stay silent. People are going to believe what they read if you don't correct it." That evening I received a call from my Aunt Patricia, Mom's older sister. I hadn't spoken to Patricia in several months, but we had always had a good relationship. She was one of the more sensible people in my extended family, and I was curious what she thought about the whole situation. "Sarah, honey, I saw your mother's post on Facebook, and I wanted to call you directly," Patricia said. "I know there are always two sides to every story, and I wanted to hear yours." I found myself telling Patricia everything. The insurance situation, the forged signature, the years of unauthorized payments, the investigation, the hotel room confrontation. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or concern. "Oh honey," she said when I finished. "I had no idea it was this complicated. Linda's post made it sound like you had just cut them off completely." "Aunt Patricia, I offered to help the morning I found out about the fire. Tyler told me not to come because I would make it about myself. They pushed me away before I even had a chance to do anything." "That doesn't sound like the Sarah I know. You've always been the responsible one, the one who helps everyone else. Apparently I've been helping more than I realized." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, can I ask you something? This might sound strange, but over the years, have you noticed your parents seeming less worried about money than they should be?" "What do you mean?" "Well, your father's construction work is seasonal, and Linda's job at the department store doesn't pay much, but they never seem to struggle the way other people in similar situations do. When my husband was out of work, we were constantly stressed about bills, but Bob and Linda always seemed comfortable. I wondered if maybe Bob was doing side work or if they had savings I didn't know about." Patricia's observation confirmed what Jessica had noticed. My parents had been living with a financial security that didn't match their actual income, and now I knew why. They had been living off my money without realizing it. "Aunt Patricia, what do you think I should do about Mom's Facebook post? People are going to think I'm a terrible daughter." "Honey, the people who know you won't think that. And the people who don't know you well enough to give you the benefit of the doubt don't matter. But I do think you need to set the record straight somehow, even if you can't share all the details." After we hung up, I spent the evening crafting a response to Mom's Facebook post. I wrote and deleted dozens of versions, trying to find the right balance between defending myself and not revealing information that would humiliate my family. Finally, I settled on something simple and factual. I love my family and have been trying to help in every way I can. Unfortunately, there are some complicated insurance and legal issues that need to be resolved before the claim can be processed. I hope we can work through these challenges together and focus on getting everyone back on their feet. I posted the comment and immediately felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. It was vague enough not to reveal the fraud situation, but clear enough to indicate that the insurance delays weren't my fault. Within an hour, several family friends had responded with supportive messages, and a few people asked if there was anything they could do to help resolve the insurance issues. But Mom's response came quickly and was more aggressive than I expected. Some issues are more important than legal technicalities. Family should come first. I stared at that comment for a long time. Family should come first. But which family was she talking about? The family that had secretly used my money for years. The family that had pushed me away the moment I tried to help. The family that was now publicly shaming me for not helping enough. The next morning, I received a voicemail from Mark Henderson at State Farm. His tone was professional but serious, and he asked me to call him back as soon as possible regarding new developments in the claim investigation. When I called him back, he got straight to the point. Sarah, we've completed our preliminary investigation into the policy transfer, and I need to discuss our findings with you. Can you come in today? An hour later, I was back in Mark's office, feeling like I was about to receive test results that would determine the rest of my life. Sarah, I'll be direct with you. Mark began, our handwriting analysis indicates that the signature on the policy transfer document was likely forged. The technical analysis shows several inconsistencies with your verified signatures on other documents. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and dread. I had been right about not signing the document, but that meant my father had definitely committed fraud. However, Mark continued. There's another complication. During our investigation, we contacted your bank to verify the payment history, and they provided us with additional information about the account activity during the relevant time period. He handed me a printout that made my stomach drop. It was a detailed list of transactions from my account between March and June 2019, during the period when I had given my parents temporary access to help with bills. The insurance payment was there, but so were dozens of other charges I had never seen before. Sarah, during those 4 months, there were over 60 unauthorized transactions from your account. The insurance transfer was just one of many things that happened during that period. Your parents essentially had unlimited access to your money, and they used it extensively. I scanned the list, feeling sicker with each line item. Grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, department stores, online purchases. In 4 months, they had spent over $6,000 beyond the insurance payments. But here's the thing that complicates this legally. Mark continued. Many of these purchases were for normal household expenses and necessities. A prosecutor might argue that your parents reasonably believed they had permission to make these purchases since you had given them account access during a financial emergency. But I specifically told them it was just for utilities and groceries until Dad found work again. I believe you, Sarah, but proving what was said in private family conversations is very difficult. What we can prove is that someone forged your signature on an insurance document, but the financial picture is complicated enough that criminal prosecution might be challenging. Mark explained that State Farm was prepared to process the claim and pay it to me as the legitimate policyholder, but they wanted to be clear about the potential legal ramifications before moving forward. If I chose to pursue fraud charges against my father, the case would become much more complicated and could delay the claim indefinitely. What happens if I don't pursue charges? Then we process the claim normally and pay you the settlement amount. What you do with that money after you receive it is entirely up to you. I drove home from the insurance office, feeling like I was carrying the weight of my entire family's future. In my hands was the power to either help them rebuild their lives, or to destroy my father with criminal charges. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the family who had told me I wasn't their problem had made me the single most important person in determining their fate. That evening, Tyler called me for the first time since our hotel room confrontation. Sarah, I know things have been weird between us, but I need to ask you something directly. Are you going to turn Dad in for the insurance thing? Tyler, I haven't decided anything yet. This is complicated. I get that it's complicated, but he's our dad. He made a mistake, but he didn't mean to hurt you. He was just trying to take care of the family.
Hey!
By forging my signature and stealing my money. He didn't steal anything, Sarah. You were helping us, remember. You gave us access to your account. I gave you access for groceries and utilities for a few months, not for 4 years of insurance payments and $6,000 in random purchases I never authorized. There was a long pause. Sarah, I didn't know about the other purchases. But even if Dad went too far, do you really want to send him to prison over this?
Hey!
Mom would be devastated. The whole family would fall apart. Tyler, the family already fell apart. You told me not to come help you because I would make it about myself. Mom posted on Facebook that I abandoned you all. You've already decided I'm not really part of this family anyway. That's not fair, Sarah. We were upset and emotional. People say things they don't mean when they're dealing with trauma. But Tyler, the thing is, I've been dealing with this trauma too. My childhood home burned down too. Those were my memories in that house too. But instead of getting support from my family, I've been told I'm selfish and unsupportive, while simultaneously discovering that I've been financially supporting all of you for years without knowing it. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Sarah, if we had known about the insurance payments, things would have been different. We would have thanked you, we would have appreciated what you were doing. Would you have, Tyler? Because from where I sit, it looks like you were perfectly happy accepting my help as long as you didn't have to acknowledge it was help. You got to feel independent and self-sufficient while I was quietly paying your bills. That's not how it was, Sarah. Then how was it, Tyler? Explain to me how I'm supposed to feel good about being told I'm not part of the family while literally paying for the family's survival. Tyler couldn't answer that question, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted him to. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Tyler asking me to think about the bigger picture, and me promising to consider all my options carefully. But as I hung up the phone, I realized that I had been thinking about the bigger picture for my entire adult life. I had been quietly helping, quietly supporting, quietly fixing problems, while my family maintained the illusion that they were handling everything themselves. The bigger picture was that I had been systematically erased from my own story of helping them, and now they wanted me to continue being erased to protect them from the consequences of their actions. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to pursue criminal charges against Dad, but I also wasn't going to pretend that none of this had happened. I was going to claim the insurance money that was legally mine, and then I was going to have a very serious conversation with my family about what our relationship was going to look like going forward. The days of quietly supporting them, while being publicly dismissed, were over. If they wanted my help, they were going to have to acknowledge what that help actually meant, both financially and emotionally. And if they couldn't do that, then maybe Tyler had been right when he said we could handle our own problems separately. The daughter they had trained to disappear into the background was finally ready to step into the light. 2 weeks after my conversation with Tyler, I received a call that changed everything. Wasn't from my family, from the insurance company, or even from a lawyer. It was from Mrs. Patricia Williams, the elderly neighbor who lived across the street from my parents' house. I barely knew her beyond polite waves and holiday greetings, but her voice on the phone was urgent and concerned. Sarah, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the church directory. I need to tell you something about the night of the fire, something that's been bothering me ever since it happened. Mrs. Williams explained that she had been awake that night because of her arthritis, and had been sitting by her living room window when she saw the fire start. What she told me next made my blood run cold. Sarah, I saw Tyler outside the house about 20 minutes before the fire department arrived. He was standing by his truck, on the phone with someone, and he was laughing. Not panicked laughing, but actually laughing like he was enjoying a conversation. It struck me odd because if my house was burning down, I don't think I'd be having a pleasant phone call. She continued. And then when the fire trucks came, I saw him quickly walk over to where your parents were standing, and suddenly he started acting upset and panicked. Like he was putting on a show. It might not mean anything, dear, but it's been nagging at me. Something about his behavior didn't seem right. After Mrs. Williams hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me again. Tyler had been acting strange during the fire, but why? What could he possibly gain from the house burning down? Unless I called the insurance office and asked Mark Henderson if I could review the fire investigation report. When he hesitated, I reminded him that as the policyholder, I had a right to see all documentation related to the claim. The fire department's report made for interesting reading. The fire had started in the kitchen, apparently from an electrical issue with an old coffee maker. But there were a few details that caught my attention. First, the coffee maker had been unplugged and sitting on the counter when firefighters arrived, which was unusual if it had been the source of an electrical fire. Second, there were signs that someone had been moving around the house before the fire department arrived, opening windows and doors that might have helped the fire spread more quickly. Most importantly, the fire chief had noted that the family's behavior seemed unusually calm for people who had just lost their home. Tyler, in particular, had been very composed and seemed to have a good understanding of insurance procedures for someone who had never filed a major claim before. I spent the next several hours researching everything I could about insurance fraud and arson. What I learned made me sick to my stomach. House fires set for insurance money were more common than I had realized, especially during economic downturns when families were struggling financially. And the profile of people who committed this type of fraud often included individuals who had access to someone else's insurance policy but weren't the actual policy holders. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that terrified me. Tyler had been unemployed for months and living with my parents. He knew about their financial struggles better than anyone. He also knew that I had helped them in the past and might be willing to help again. But what if he had discovered something about the insurance policy that the rest of the family didn't know? I decided to do something I probably should have done weeks earlier. I drove to the Glendale Police Department and asked to speak with Detective Maria Santos, who had been assigned to routine follow-up on the fire case. Detective Santos was a middle-aged woman with kind but sharp eyes, who listened carefully as I explained my concerns about Tyler's behavior and the insurance situation. When I showed her Mrs. Williams' account and the fire department report, her expression grew more serious. Miss Mitchell, these are significant allegations. Are you saying you believe your brother deliberately set fire to your parents' house to collect insurance money that he knew would be paid to you? I don't know what I'm saying, detective, but something isn't right about this whole situation. The insurance policy that I've been unknowingly paying for, Tyler's strange behavior during the fire, the fact that he's been unemployed and desperate for money. And now he's pressuring me not to pursue fraud charges against my father, almost like he's trying to keep me from looking too closely at the whole situation. Detective Santos took detailed notes and asked me several follow-up questions about Tyler's financial situation, his relationship with the family, and his knowledge of the insurance policy. She also asked for Mrs. Williams' contact information and copies of all the insurance documentation I had. Miss Mitchell, I need to be clear with you about something. If we open a criminal investigation into potential arson, it's going to affect your insurance claim. The insurance company will likely freeze all payments until the investigation is complete, which could take months or even years. Detective, if my brother burned down my parents' house to steal insurance money that I've been paying for, then I don't want that claim processed anyway. I want the truth. 3 days later, Detective Santos called me back. Miss Mitchell, we've done some preliminary investigation, and there are enough red flags here to warrant a full criminal investigation. We're going to need to interview your entire family, and I wanted to give you a heads up that this is going to get complicated quickly. She explained that they had found evidence that Tyler had been researching house fires and insurance claims on his computer in the weeks leading up to the fire. They had also discovered that he had been in significant debt, much more than the family realized, and had been facing potential legal action from creditors. Miss Mitchell, there's one more thing. When we interviewed Mrs. Williams more thoroughly, she remembered something else. She saw Tyler near the house earlier that evening, before your parents got home from their dinner out. He was inside for about an hour, alone. The criminal investigation moved quickly after that. Within a week, Tyler had been arrested and charged with arson and insurance fraud. The evidence against him was substantial: the computer searches, his financial desperation, Mrs. Williams' testimony about his behavior, and most damning of all, traces of accelerant found in the kitchen that hadn't been mentioned in the initial fire report. When Tyler was arrested, the rest of my family's reaction was exactly what I expected, and exactly what broke my heart. Dad called me screaming that I had destroyed the family by going to the police. Mom left voicemails sobbing that I had chosen strangers over my own brother. Jessica sent text messages begging me to drop the charges and let the family handle this privately. But the most painful response came from Tyler himself. From jail, he managed to get a message to me through Jessica. "I did this for all of us, Sarah. The insurance money would have helped everyone. You were never going to miss it anyway, and Mom and Dad needed it. I was trying to take care of the family." Even facing criminal charges, Tyler still saw himself as the hero of the story. He had burned down our childhood home, traumatized our parents, and committed multiple felonies. But in his mind, he was just taking care of the family by stealing money. I wouldn't miss it anyway. The insurance company, understandably, denied the entire claim once the arson charges were filed. Not only would my family not receive any money to rebuild, but State Farm also began the process of trying to recover the premiums I had paid over the years, since the policy had been obtained through fraud and used in the commission of a crime. I found myself in the surreal position of being both a victim of my family's crimes and the person they blamed for destroying their lives. The daughter who had been secretly supporting them for years was now the enemy because I had refused to let them steal from me anymore. 6 months later, Tyler pleaded guilty to arson and insurance fraud in exchange for a reduced
sentence. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison.
with the possibility of parole in 2 years. Dad was charged with identity theft and forgery related to the insurance policy transfer, but received probation and community service because of his age and lack of prior criminal history. The family I had grown up in essentially ceased to exist after that. Mom and Dad moved in with Jessica temporarily, then eventually found a small apartment across town. They never spoke to me again, except through lawyers when the insurance company pursued civil litigation to recover their losses. Jessica tried to maintain a relationship with me for a few months, but it became clear that she felt I should have handled things differently. In her mind, I should have quietly paid for Tyler's legal defense, helped my parents find a new place to live, and somehow made the whole situation go away without involving the criminal justice system. The extended family chose sides, as extended families do in situations like this. About half of them understood that I had been the victim of multiple crimes and supported my decision to seek justice. The other half believed that family loyalty should have trumped everything else, and that I had betrayed my own blood by cooperating with the police. But something unexpected happened during those difficult months of legal proceedings and family destruction. I began to understand what it felt like to live without the constant weight of other people's problems on my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't secretly supporting anyone, wasn't quietly fixing anyone's mistakes, wasn't managing anyone's emotions or financial crises. At first it felt lonely and wrong. I had been trained from childhood to see my value in terms of what I could do for other people. Without a family to support and rescue, I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be. But gradually, I began to discover parts of myself that had been buried under years of caretaking and people-pleasing. I started taking art classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for when I was managing everyone else's emergencies. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of visiting but couldn't afford when I was unknowingly paying for my family's expenses. Most importantly, I began to understand the difference between healthy love and codependent obligation. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse or enabling their crimes. Family loyalty doesn't require you to sacrifice your own well-being or participate in covering up illegal behavior. A year after Tyler's sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. It was Emma, my cousin from my father's side of the family, who had always been neutral in family conflicts but had stayed in touch with everyone. "Sarah, I wanted you to know that I've been talking to some of the relatives who took sides against you, and opinions are starting to change," she said. "People are beginning to understand that you didn't have a choice. Tyler committed serious crimes, and you couldn't just pretend that didn't happen." Emma told me that Tyler had been talking to other family members from prison, and his version of events had started to shift over time. Initially, he had maintained that he was trying to help the family, and that I had overreacted. But as the reality of his situation set in, he had begun to admit that he had been selfish and destructive. "He's been asking about you, Sarah. Not asking people to contact you, but asking how you're doing, whether you're okay. I think he's finally understanding what he put you through." Emma's visit didn't heal all the wounds or restore my relationship with my family, but it did give me something I hadn't realized I needed: validation that I had made the right choice, even though it had been the hardest choice. 2 years later, I met David Rodriguez, not as a lawyer handling my family's legal troubles, but as a fellow art student in a pottery class. He was recently divorced, rebuilding his life after his own family trauma, and he understood what it meant to choose your own well-being over other people's expectations. David and I began dating slowly, carefully, both of us wary of rushing into anything that might replicate the unhealthy patterns we had left behind. But what we built together was completely different from any relationship I had ever known. It was based on mutual respect, honest communication, and the understanding that love doesn't require you to lose yourself in someone else's needs. When David proposed 18 months later, I realized that I had finally found what I had been searching for my entire life: a family that I chose rather than one that chose what I could do for them. We had a small wedding in Sedona, surrounded by friends and the relatives who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. Emma was there, along with Aunt Patricia, and several cousins who had refused to take sides in the family conflict. Mrs. Williams, who had become an unlikely friend and mentor, walked me down the aisle since I no longer had a father who was part of my life. It wasn't the wedding I had dreamed of as a little girl, with my father walking me down the aisle and my whole family celebrating together. But it was honest, and it was mine, and it was built on relationships that honored who I actually was, rather than what I could provide. 3 years after that, David and I bought a house in North Scottsdale, far enough from my old neighborhood to feel like a fresh start but close enough to the life I had built in Phoenix. We planted a garden, adopted 2 rescue dogs, and created traditions that belonged only to us. I still think about my original family sometimes, especially during holidays or major life events. I wonder if mom and dad are healthy, if Jessica's kids are doing well in school, if Tyler is adjusting to life after prison. But I've learned that you can love people from a distance, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable their destructive behavior. The most important lesson I learned from that terrible year of fires and fraud and family destruction is that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can't love people into making better choices. You can't sacrifice yourself to fix other people's problems. What you can do is choose to build a life based on honesty, mutual respect, and healthy boundaries. You can choose relationships with people who see you as a whole person, rather than just a solution to their problems. You can choose to stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Last month, I received a letter from Tyler. He's been out of prison for 8 months, living in Tucson and working construction like Dad used to. The letter was short but sincere, acknowledging the harm he had caused and taking responsibility for his choices. He didn't ask for forgiveness or a relationship, just wanted me to know that he understood now what he had done to me and to the family. I wrote back, not to restore our relationship, but to acknowledge his growth and wish him well in building a better life. It felt like closing a chapter that had been left open for too long. The story I lived through isn't the story I would have chosen, but it's the story that taught me who I really am underneath all the roles I had been taught to play. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is also the thing that sets you free. The house fire that was supposed to destroy everything actually cleared the ground for me to build something real. The family crisis that was supposed to bring us together actually revealed which relationships were worth saving and which ones were built on exploitation and obligation. I learned that not all families are safe places, that not all love is healthy love, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your value. But I also learned that chosen families can be stronger than biological ones, that healing is possible even after devastating betrayal, and that you can build a life based on your own values rather than other people's expectations. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the person everyone turns to for help, but no one really sees as a person, if you're carrying other people's problems while they take credit for solving them, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve relationships that are based on mutual respect rather than what you can provide. You deserve to be seen and valued for who you are, not just what you can do. You deserve to set boundaries without being made to feel guilty for having them. Most importantly, you deserve to build a life that belongs to you, filled with people who love you enough to want you to be happy rather than just useful. It took a house fire and criminal charges for me to learn these lessons, but you don't have to wait for a crisis to start choosing yourself. You can start today, with one small boundary, one honest conversation, one decision to stop carrying other people's problems while they carry none of yours. The daughter who disappeared into the background of everyone else's story finally learned to write her own story. And in that story, she doesn't save everyone else at the expense of herself. In that story, she builds something real and lasting and true. In that story, she's not just the help, she's the hero of her own life. 5 years have passed since that October morning, when everything changed, and I'm sitting in my home office in North Scottsdale, looking out at the desert landscape that has become my sanctuary. The morning light streams through the window, illuminating the painting I finished last week in my art studio, a piece that captures the phoenix rising from ashes that has become my personal symbol of transformation. David is in the kitchen making coffee, humming off-key as he always does when he's happy, and our golden retriever, Maya, is sprawled across my feet under the desk. This quiet domestic scene would have been unimaginable to me during those dark months when my world was falling apart, but it represents everything I've learned about what real family actually looks like. Last week, something unexpected happened that brought my past and present into sharp focus. I received a phone call from Detective Santos, who I hadn't spoken to since Tyler's sentencing. She was calling to let me know that Tyler had contacted the police department, asking if they could provide him with my current contact information. He wasn't asking them to reach out to me directly, just wondering if there was a proper way to request communication after everything that had happened. Mitchell, I want to be clear that he's not pressuring us to contact you, and we haven't given him any of your information, Detective Santos explained. But he did ask me to tell you, if I ever spoke with you, that he's been working with a counselor in a restorative justice program. He's not seeking forgiveness or trying to rebuild the relationship, but he wanted you to know that he takes full responsibility for what he did and understands the impact his actions had on your life. I thanked Detective Santos for the call and told her I would think about whether I wanted any contact with Tyler. The truth was, I had already been thinking about him more lately, not with anger or resentment, but with a kind of detached curiosity about how his life had unfolded after prison. Through Emma, who maintained loose contact with various family members, I had heard snippets of information over the years. Tyler had served his full sentence and been released about a year ago. He was living in Tucson, working for a solar panel installation company, and attending regular counseling sessions. According to Emma, he had never tried to contact any of the family members who had supported him during the legal proceedings, seemingly understanding that his actions had consequences that extended far beyond his prison sentence. Dad had struggled more with the aftermath than anyone expected. The man who had always prided himself on being the family patriarch had to face the reality that his own poor decisions had contributed to the destruction of everything he claimed to value. The stress of the legal proceedings and the family breakup had affected his health, and he had suffered a mild heart attack about 2 years after Tyler's sentencing. He recovered physically, but Emma said he had become withdrawn and depressed, rarely speaking about the children he had lost through his own actions. Mom had adapted better, throwing herself into her church activities and volunteer work with a local food bank. She had never remarried or seriously dated, but she seemed to have found some peace in helping other families in crisis. Ironically, her volunteer work involved counseling families about financial abuse and fraud, topics she understood all too well from personal experience. Jessica had probably been affected the most by the family's implosion. As the middle child who had always tried to maintain relationships with everyone, she found herself caught between competing loyalties and unable to reconcile her love for Tyler with her understanding that I had been victimized by the family's actions. She had moved her family to Colorado about 3 years ago, partly for her husband's job, but also, according to Emma, to get distance from the ongoing family drama that continued to affect their children's relationships with their extended family. The most surprising update Emma had shared was about Tyler's relationship with our parents. Unlike what everyone expected, he had not tried to rebuild close relationships with Mom and Dad after his release from prison. Instead, he had maintained polite but distant contact, checking in on their health and welfare, but not seeking to resume the dependent relationship he had maintained with them before the fire. "It's like he finally grew up," Emma had told me during our last conversation. Prison was horrible for him, but it also forced him to face some truths about himself that he had been avoiding his whole life. "He's a different person now, Sarah, not just older but genuinely different in how he thinks about responsibility and consequences." After Detective Santos's call, I found myself thinking about the concept of restorative justice and whether there was any value in hearing what Tyler had to say after all these years. Not because I needed his apology to heal or move forward with my life, but because I was curious about what genuine accountability looked like from someone who had caused such devastating harm. I discussed it with David, who listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions without trying to influence my decision. One of the things I loved most about our relationship was that he trusted me to know what was best for my own healing and never tried to protect me from difficult decisions by making them for me. "What would you hope to gain from talking to him?" David asked as we walked Maya through our neighborhood that evening. "I don't know if I'd gain anything," I admitted, "but I think I'm curious about whether someone can genuinely change after doing something that destructive. And maybe I want him to understand what his actions really cost, not just in terms of money or legal consequences, but in terms of how they affected my understanding of family and trust." "Are you worried that talking to him might set you back emotionally or undo some of the healing you've done?" I considered that question seriously. 5 years ago, any contact with Tyler would have sent me into an emotional tailspin, reopening wounds that were barely beginning to heal. But the woman I had become through therapy, healthy relationships, and intentional personal growth felt strong enough to engage with my past without being consumed by it. "I don't think it would set me back," I said finally. I think I'm solid enough in who I am now that I can hear what he has to say without it changing my understanding of what happened, or my decision to protect myself from future harm. After several more conversations with David and a discussion with my therapist, Dr. Rachel Kim, who had been instrumental in my healing journey, I decided to write Tyler a letter. Not agreeing to meet or talk, but opening the door to communication if he was genuinely interested in accountability rather than reconciliation. The letter took me several weeks to write, through multiple drafts and careful consideration of every word. I wanted to be clear about my boundaries, while also being open to the possibility that he had genuinely changed. When I finally mailed it, I felt a mixture of nervousness and curiosity about what would come next. Tyler's response came 3 weeks later, and it was unlike anything I had expected. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten on simple notebook paper, and it demonstrated a level of self-awareness and accountability that I had never seen from him before. He began by acknowledging the full scope of what he had done, not just the legal crimes, but the emotional and psychological damage his actions had caused. He wrote about understanding that his decision to commit arson had not only destroyed our parents' home, but had shattered my trust in family relationships and forced me to become involved in criminal proceedings that had been traumatic for everyone involved. I know that saying I'm sorry is not enough, and that it doesn't undo the harm I caused, he wrote. I also know that I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, or to expect that we can have any kind of relationship in the future. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I was too selfish and desperate to understand then. I took advantage of your generosity and love, and I used your financial support as an opportunity to commit crimes that hurt you and our entire family. The most striking part of his letter was his analysis of the family dynamics that had contributed to the situation. Tyler wrote about recognizing that our family had trained me to be the caretaker and financial safety net, while simultaneously taking that support for granted and resenting me for my success. He acknowledged that his decision to commit arson had been motivated not just by financial desperation, but by anger and resentment toward me for having what he saw as an easier life. I realize now that I never really saw you as a person with your own struggles and needs, he wrote. I saw you as someone who had it easy, and should share what you had with the rest of us. I never thought about what it cost you to constantly help the family, or how it felt to be seen as a resource, rather than a sister. The counseling I've been doing has helped me understand that what I did was not just criminal, but it was also a form of emotional abuse that had been going on for years before the fire. Tyler's letter also addressed the issue of our parents and their role in the family dysfunction. He wrote about coming to understand that Dad's decision to forge my signature and transfer the insurance policy had been wrong, regardless of his intentions, and that the family's pattern of using my money without my knowledge had been a form of theft, even if they hadn't consciously recognized it as such. I know that Mom and Dad didn't set out to steal from you, he wrote, but the impact of their actions was the same as if they had deliberately taken your money. And I think part of why I felt justified in burning down the house was because I had grown up in a family where taking advantage of your financial support was normalized. It doesn't excuse what I did, but it helps me understand how I got to a place where I thought committing felonies was acceptable if it helped the family. The letter concluded with Tyler sharing some details about his life since prison and his commitment to making different choices going forward. He was in therapy, working steadily, and had no contact with the friends who had encouraged his destructive behavior before his arrest. He was also participating in a restorative justice program, where he spoke to other families about the impact of financial crimes and addiction on family relationships. I'm not writing this letter because I want to rebuild our relationship, or because I expect you to forgive me, Tyler concluded. I'm writing because I finally understand that accountability means acknowledging the full truth of what I did and how it affected you. You deserved better from me as a brother, and you deserved better from all of us as a family. I hope you've been able to build a life that honors who you really are, rather than just what you can do for other people. Reading Tyler's letter was an emotional experience, but not in the way I had expected. Instead of reopening old wounds or making me angry, it provided a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time, someone from my original family had truly seen and acknowledged the full scope of what I had experienced, without minimizing my pain or asking me to prioritize their needs over my own healing. I shared the letter with David and Dr. Kim, both of whom helped me process what it meant to receive such a comprehensive acknowledgement of harm from someone who had caused significant trauma in my life. Kim pointed out that Tyler's letter demonstrated genuine accountability because it focused on understanding and acknowledging the impact of his actions rather than seeking forgiveness or reconciliation. This is what healthy accountability looks like, she explained. He's not asking you to make him feel better about what he did, and he's not trying to use his apology to rebuild a relationship. He's simply taking responsibility for his actions and their impact, which is something you deserve to hear, regardless of whether it changes anything between you. After careful consideration, I decided to write Tyler one final letter. I thanked him for his accountability and acknowledged the growth it represented. I also shared some information about my own healing journey and the life I had built since the family crisis, not to hurt him, but to help him understand that his actions had ultimately led to positive changes in my life. Your letter helps me understand that the person who committed those crimes was someone who was lost and desperate, rather than someone who was fundamentally evil. I can't forgive what you did, because the impact was too significant, but I can appreciate the work you've done to become someone who would never make those choices again. I hope you continue to build a life based on honesty and accountability, and I hope our parents can find some peace with the consequences of their own choices. I concluded the letter by explaining that while I appreciated his accountability, I would not be pursuing any ongoing communication or relationship. We can both move forward, knowing that we've acknowledged the truth of what happened between us, I wrote. That feels like enough closure for both of us. Mailing that final letter felt like completing a circle that had been broken for years. I wasn't reconciling with Tyler or welcoming him back into my life, but I was acknowledging that people can change, and that accountability has value even when it doesn't lead to restored relationships. Around the same time I was corresponding with Tyler, David and I received some news that shifted our focus toward the future in a profound way. After 2 years of trying to have children and dealing with fertility challenges, we learned that I was pregnant. The pregnancy was unexpected after months of negative tests, and it represented a new chapter in our life together that filled me with excitement and some anxiety. As I thought about becoming a mother, I found myself reflecting on the family patterns I had grown up with, and making conscious decisions about what kind of family environment I wanted to create for my child. I was determined to raise a child who understood that love doesn't require self-sacrifice, that healthy relationships involve mutual support rather than one-sided caretaking, and that family loyalty should never require accepting abuse or illegal behavior. David and I spent many evenings talking about the kind of parents we wanted to be and the values we wanted to instill in our children. We both came from families where dysfunction had been normalized, and we were committed to breaking those cycles through intentional choices about communication, boundaries, and emotional health. I want our kids to know that they're valued for who they are, not what they can do for other people. I told David as we painted the nursery, a soft yellow color that would work for either a boy or girl. And I want them to understand that love means supporting each other's growth and happiness, not controlling or manipulating each other. David added, carefully taping around the window trim. Our daughter Elena Rose was born on a clear February morning, and holding her for the first time was like experiencing a love I had never imagined possible. As I looked at her tiny face and perfect fingers, I felt a fierce protectiveness that was completely different from the anxious caretaking I had done for my original family. This was healthy love, the kind that wants the other person to thrive and be independent, rather than the codependent love that needs the other person to remain needy and grateful. Elena is now 6 months old, and watching her develop her own personality has been one of the most joyful experiences of my life. She's curious and determined, already showing signs that she will be someone who knows her own mind and isn't easily manipulated or controlled. David and I joke that she's going to be a handful as a teenager, but we're committed to raising her to be strong and independent, rather than compliant and people-pleasing. Being Elena's mother has also given me a new perspective on my own childhood and the family dynamics that shaped me. I can see now how my parents' expectations and the family's financial struggles created an environment where I learned to equate my value with what I could provide for others. But I can also see that those patterns were probably passed down through generations, and that my parents were likely repeating dynamics they had learned in their own families. Understanding the generational nature of family dysfunction doesn't excuse the choices my family made, but it does help me feel compassion for the broken people who raised me. They did the best they could with the emotional tools they had, even though those tools were inadequate and sometimes harmful. Last month, Emma called to tell me that Dad had asked her to find out if I might be willing to see a photo of Elena. He had heard through the family network that David and I had a baby, and he was curious about his granddaughter, but understood that he had forfeited any right to be part of her life. He's not asking to meet her or have any contact, Emma explained carefully. He just wondered if you might be willing to let him see what she looks like. He seems to understand that his actions have consequences, and he's not pushing for anything more than that. I thought about Dad's request for several days. Part of me felt sad that Elena would never know her grandfather, but a larger part of me felt protective of her, and determined not to expose her to family members, who might try to manipulate, or use her to get back into my life. In the end, I asked Emma to tell Dad that I wasn't comfortable sharing photos, but that I appreciated that he was respecting my boundaries, by asking through her rather than trying to contact me directly. I also asked her to tell him that I hoped he was taking care of his health, and finding some peace with the choices he had made. You can tell him that I don't hate him, I told Emma. But Elena is my chance to create a healthy family environment, and I can't risk exposing her to people who haven't demonstrated that they can maintain appropriate boundaries. Emma understood completely, and promised to relay my message, in a way that was honest, but not unnecessarily hurtful. She also shared that she thought Dad was finally beginning to understand the full impact of his actions, and that he seemed genuinely remorseful, rather than just sorry he had been caught. As Elena grows older, I know she will eventually ask questions about my family, and why she doesn't have grandparents or aunts and uncles on my side. David and I have already talked about how we'll handle those conversations, and we're committed to being honest with her in age-appropriate ways, about the fact that sometimes families make choices that require other family members to protect themselves. We'll tell her that some people we're related to made very hurtful choices, and that we had to make difficult decisions to keep our family safe, David suggested. And we'll make sure she understands that she's not responsible for fixing other people's problems, or maintaining relationships that aren't healthy. The irony of my story is that losing my original family led me to create a chosen family that is healthier and more loving than anything I experienced growing up. David, Elena, Maya, and the close friends who have become our extended family represent everything I was looking for but couldn't find in my biological relationships. Our holiday traditions involve people who chose to be there because they love and value each other, not because they're obligated by blood or guilt. Our financial decisions are made together, with
complete transparency and mutual respect for each other's autonomy. Our conflicts are resolved through honest communication rather than manipulation or emotional blackmail. Most importantly, our love for each other is based on who we are as individuals, not what we can provide or fix for each other. Elena will grow up knowing that she's cherished for her own unique personality and potential, not because she's expected to take care of anyone else's emotional or financial needs. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had made different choices during that crisis 5 years ago. What if I had quietly paid for Tyler's legal defense? What if I had helped my parents rebuild without ever addressing the fraud and theft? What if I had continued being the family safety net while pretending that nothing had changed? I think I would have saved my original family relationships, but I would have lost myself completely. I would have taught my family that there were no consequences for stealing from me, lying to me, or treating me as a resource rather than a person. And eventually I would have become so depleted and resentful that the relationships would have imploded anyway, probably in an even more destructive way. The choice to prioritize truth and accountability over family harmony was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was also the decision that saved my life. It allowed me to learn what healthy love actually looks like, to build relationships based on mutual respect, and to create a family environment where Elena can grow up knowing that she's valued for who she is, rather than what she can do for others. My story isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending where everyone reconciles and lives happily ever after. It's a real story about the costs and benefits of choosing yourself when the people who are supposed to love you refuse to see your value. It's about learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when that refusal destroys relationships you once treasured. But it's also a story about resilience, healing, and the possibility of creating something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. 5 years ago, I thought my family crisis was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I understand that it was actually the beginning of my real life, the life where I get to choose who I become rather than accepting the role other people assign to me. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to know that choosing yourself is not selfish. Protecting yourself from financial abuse is not betraying your family. Refusing to cover up crimes is not being disloyal. You deserve relationships that honor your humanity rather than exploiting your generosity. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries and value your well-being. The people who see you as a resource to be used will always resent your attempts to protect yourself, and their resentment will tell you everything you need to know about what you really meant to them. It took a house fire, criminal charges, and the complete destruction of my original family for me to learn these lessons. But you don't have to wait for a crisis to start choosing yourself. You can start today, with one small boundary, one honest conversation, one decision to stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. The daughter who disappeared into everyone else's story finally learned to write her own story. And in that story, she doesn't save everyone else at the expense of herself. In that story, she builds something real and lasting and true, something worthy of the beautiful life she was always meant to live. 10 years have passed since that devastating October morning that changed everything, and as I sit here in my art studio watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I can hardly believe the woman I've become. Elena is now 5 years old, starting kindergarten next month, and her little brother Marcus just turned 2 last week. David and I celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary this spring with a trip to Italy, something we never could have imagined when we were both rebuilding our lives from the wreckage of our respective family traumas. The art studio where I'm sitting was built 3 years ago, as an addition to our home, a space entirely my own where I can create without interruption or obligation to anyone else's needs. The walls are lined with paintings that tell the story of my transformation, from dark, chaotic pieces I created during the legal proceedings, to bright, hopeful canvases that capture the joy I've found in chosen family and authentic relationships. Today marks exactly 10 years since the fire, and for the first time in a decade, I'm not dreading this anniversary. In previous years, this date brought back all the trauma and confusion of that period, the betrayal and loss and fear that dominated my life for so long. But this year feels different, like I've finally reached a place where the past can exist in my memory without controlling my present. Elena bounds into the studio, her dark curls bouncing as she carries a drawing she's been working on. At 5, she's already showing the artistic inclination that seems to run in both David's family and mine, but more importantly, she's developing the confidence and independence that I was never allowed to have as a child. "Mama, look what I made," she says, climbing onto my lap to show me her creation. It's a picture of our family, all 4 of us plus Maya and our new kitten Luna, standing in front of our house under a rainbow. What strikes me most about Elena's drawing is that everyone in the picture is smiling and holding hands, but they're also clearly individual people with their own distinct characteristics and space. "Tell me about your picture, sweetheart," I say, wrapping my arms around her small frame and breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "That's you and Daddy and me and Marcus, and we're all happy because we love each other but we're not squished together. Everyone has room to be themselves," she explains matter-of-factly, pointing to each figure in turn. Elena's simple explanation captures something profound about the family David and I have created together. We love each other deeply, but we've been intentional about maintaining our individual identities and encouraging each other's personal growth. Elena will never know what it feels like to be valued only for what she can provide to others, because she's being raised to understand that her worth is inherent and unconditional. That's a beautiful picture, Elena. I love how you gave everyone their own space while still showing that we're a family. Miss Jennifer at school says that's what healthy families do. They love each other but they don't squish each other's feelings. Jennifer is Elena's preschool teacher, and I'm grateful that even at school, Elena is learning about healthy relationships and emotional boundaries. David and I have been very intentional about choosing educational environments that align with our values about respect, independence, and emotional intelligence. Marcus toddles into the studio a few minutes later, followed by David, who's carrying the latest issue of a home design magazine that features an article about our house. The journalist who interviewed us was fascinated by the story of how we designed our home specifically to encourage both togetherness and individual space. With separate work areas for each of us and common areas that facilitate connection without forcing constant interaction. The article turned out really well, David says, settling into the comfortable chair I keep in the studio for visitors. They did a good job focusing on the design philosophy without getting too personal about why we made the choices we did.
The feature article was part of a series about homes designed by people who had overcome trauma, and while we didn't share the specific details of my family situation, we did talk about how our home reflects our commitment to healthy relationships and personal autonomy. The house has become something of a showcase for architects interested in creating spaces that support emotional well-being. As evening approaches and we gather the children for dinner, I find myself thinking about the path that led us to this moment. The woman who discovered her family's betrayal 10 years ago could never have imagined this life, this peace, this sense of security that comes from building something real and honest. Over dinner, Elena tells us about her plans for kindergarten, chattering excitedly about making new friends and learning to read chapter books. Marcus babbles happily in his high chair, occasionally throwing pieces of his dinner to Maya, who has stationed herself strategically beneath his seat. David and I exchange amused glances over the chaos, both of us marveling at how normal and wonderful this ordinary family dinner feels. After the children are in bed, David and I sit on our back patio with glasses of wine, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. It's become our tradition to spend these quiet evening hours talking about our days, our dreams, and our gratitude for what we've built together. I got a call today from someone I haven't heard from in years, I tell David, swirling the wine in my glass. Emma called to let me know that Dad passed away last week. David reaches over and takes my hand, his touch warm and comforting. How are you feeling about that? I consider the question carefully. When Emma called, I had felt a complicated mixture of sadness, relief, and something that might have been regret. Not regret for the choices I made to protect myself, but regret for what might have been if my family had been capable of different choices. I'm sad that he died without us ever reconciling, but I'm not sure reconciliation was ever really possible, I say slowly. Emma said he had been in declining health for the past 2 years, and that he spent a lot of time near the end talking about his regrets. Apparently he understood that his actions had consequences, and that he had lost his children through his own choices. According to Emma, Dad had asked her several times over the years to check on me, not to facilitate contact but just to know that I was okay. He had heard about my marriage, about Elena's birth, about the art studio, and the magazine article, and he had taken some comfort in knowing that I was thriving despite everything that had happened. Tyler came to the funeral, I continue. Emma said he looked good, healthy and settled. He's been married for 3 years now to a woman who has 2 kids from a previous marriage, and they seem to have built a stable life together. He didn't ask about me specifically, but he told Emma that he hoped I was happy and that he was grateful I had given him the chance to be accountable for what he did. Tyler's presence at the funeral had surprised everyone, including Mom, who according to Emma had been both happy to see him and uncomfortable with the reminder of everything that had been lost. Tyler had kept his distance from the family drama, attending to pay his respects to Dad, but not trying to use the occasion to rebuild relationships or relitigate the past. What about your mom? How is she handling? Emma says she's struggling, but she has good support from her church community and her volunteer work. She's been living independently since Dad's health declined, and she seems to have found some peace in helping other families avoid the mistakes that destroyed ours. Mom's volunteer work with a domestic violence organization had evolved over the years to include counseling families about financial abuse and fraud. According to Emma, she had become passionate about helping other women recognize the warning signs of financial manipulation, and had even testified as a witness in several court cases involving family financial crimes. She's never asked Emma to reach out to me,
Which I appreciate, I add.
I think she understands that some damage can't be undone, even when people change and grow. David squeezes my hand gently. Do you think you'll go to the funeral? I had been wrestling with that question since Emma's call. The funeral was scheduled for the following week, and there was still time to make arrangements if I decided to attend. But after hours of consideration, I had concluded that my presence would create more disruption than healing for everyone involved. No, I don't think so. My relationship with Dad ended 10 years ago, and a funeral won't change that. The people who will be there are the ones who maintained relationships with him despite everything that happened, and they deserve to grieve without having to navigate the complications my presence would bring. Instead of attending the funeral, I had asked Emma to send flowers with a simple card expressing condolences to the family. It felt like the right balance between acknowledging Dad's death and maintaining the boundaries that had protected my peace for so many years. I think I'm finally at a place where I can feel sad about his death without feeling guilty about my choices. I tell David, he was my father, and I loved him, but he was also someone who made choices that hurt me deeply. Both of those things can be true at the same time. The next morning, I wake up early and spend some time in my art studio, working on a new painting that has been evolving slowly over the past few months. It's an abstract piece in blues and grays, with small touches of gold that catch the light in unexpected ways. I hadn't consciously intended it to be about my family situation, but as I add delicate brushstrokes this morning, I realize that it's become a meditation on loss and transformation. Elena finds me there an hour later, still in her pajamas, and carrying her favorite stuffed elephant. She climbs into my lap without asking, a privilege that belongs only to her and Marcus, and studies the painting with the serious expression she gets when she's thinking deeply about something. "Mama, why are some parts of your painting dark, and some parts shiny?" Well, sometimes in life we go through difficult times that feel dark and sad, but those experiences can also help us appreciate the bright, happy times even more. I explain, pointing to where the gold paint catches the morning light streaming through the studio windows. Like when Marcus was sick with that fever, and we were worried, but then when he got better we were extra happy. Exactly like that, sweetie. Sometimes the hard times help us understand how precious the good times really are. Elena nods solemnly, then brightens. "Can I help you paint the shiny parts?" We spend the next hour working together on the painting, Elena carefully adding small dots of gold paint where I show her, both of us absorbed in the meditative process of creation. Watching her concentrate on the brushwork, her little tongue sticking out slightly as she focuses, I'm struck by how different her childhood is from mine. Elena will never know what it feels like to be responsible for other people's emotions or financial stability. She's being raised to be helpful and kind, but not to sacrifice herself for others' comfort. She's learning that love means supporting each other's happiness and growth, not enabling destructive behavior or covering up uncomfortable truths. When David joins us for breakfast, I share the insight I've been having about the painting and about Dad's death. I think I'm finally able to hold space for the complexity of what happened with my family. I can mourn the loss of what could have been, while still being grateful for what actually happened. What do you mean? I mean that if my family hadn't betrayed me so thoroughly, I might never have found the courage to build the life I really wanted. I might have continued being the family caretaker forever, never discovering who I actually am when I'm not constantly trying to fix other people's problems. It's a paradox that has taken me years to understand. The worst thing that ever happened to me, the complete destruction of my family relationships, had also been the catalyst for the best things in my life. Without that crisis, I might never have learned to set boundaries, never have found David, never have created the kind of family environment where Elena and Marcus can thrive. So in a strange way, I'm grateful to Dad for making the choices that forced me to choose myself. I'm sad that he's gone, and I'm sad that we never found a way to rebuild our relationship, but I'm not sorry that I protected myself from further harm. That afternoon, while the children nap, I call Dr. Kim, who has remained my therapist throughout the past decade, transitioning from crisis counseling to maintenance sessions and guidance through major life transitions like marriage and parenthood. "I'm hearing a lot of integration in how you're processing your father's death," she observes after I share my thoughts about Dad's passing and my decision not to attend the funeral. "You're able to hold multiple truths simultaneously, without needing to resolve the contradictions." What do you mean by that? You can be sad that your father died while also being at peace with your decision to maintain distance from him. You can acknowledge that his choices hurt you deeply, while also recognizing that those same choices led to positive changes in your life. That kind of emotional complexity is a sign of significant healing and growth. Dr. Kim and I talk about how my response to Dad's death differs from my earlier reactions to family-related events. In the first few years after the crisis, any mention of my family would send me into emotional turmoil, triggering anxiety and self-doubt about the choices I had made. But now, I can engage with family information without it destabilizing my sense of self or my confidence in my decisions. The fact that you can feel genuine sadness about your father's death without questioning your boundaries or feeling guilty about your choices shows that you've developed a very mature and healthy relationship with your past, Dr. Kim explains. "I think becoming a mother has changed how I see everything. When I look at Elena and Marcus, I can't imagine treating them the way my family treated me. That helps me understand that the problem was never with me or my choices, it was with the family system I grew up in. And you've broken that cycle completely. Your children are growing up in an environment where their worth isn't tied to what they can provide for others, where love doesn't come with impossible conditions, where they're valued for who they are, rather than what they can do. That evening, as I'm tucking Elena into bed, she asks me a question that catches me off guard. Mama, do you have a mommy and daddy like I have you and daddy? I pause, considering how to answer this question in a way that's honest but age-appropriate. Elena knows that some families look different from ours, and we've talked about how some children live with grandparents or aunts or adoptive families, but she's never specifically asked about my parents before. I did have a mommy and daddy when I was little, but sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love, and when that happens, sometimes families have to live separately to stay safe and healthy. Elena considers this seriously. Are your mommy and daddy okay even though you don't live with them? Yes, sweetheart, they're okay. They have other people who take care of them and love them. And you know what? Even though we don't live near them, we have such a wonderful family with Daddy and Marcus and all our friends who love us. And Maya and Luna. I agree, smiling at her priorities. Mama, will you and Daddy always live with me and Marcus? We'll always be your parents, and we'll always love you no matter what. But when you grow up, you'll probably want to live in your own house, and maybe have your own family, just like how Daddy and I lived in our own houses before we met each other, and decided to build this family together. Elena seems satisfied with this answer, and I realize that she's learning something my family never taught me, that love doesn't require constant proximity or dependence, that healthy relationships can evolve and change while maintaining their essential connection. After Elena falls asleep, I find David reading in our bedroom, and share the conversation with him. We've been intentional about how we discuss family concepts with the children, wanting them to understand that families come in many different forms, and that the most important thing is that family members treat each other with love and respect. She's starting to understand that families are built on choices, not just biology, David observes. That's going to serve her well as she grows up, and has to navigate different types of relationships. I want her to understand that she gets to choose who she considers family, and that those choices should be based on how people treat her, not on obligation or guilt. The following week, Emma calls again to tell me about Dad's funeral, and to share some information that provides unexpected closure to the insurance situation that started everything 10 years ago. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about your dad's estate, Emma begins. When he died, he left a will that included a letter addressed to you. I don't know what it says, but his lawyer asked me to contact you to see if you'd be willing to receive it. I feel a familiar tightness in my chest, the automatic stress response that still sometimes occurs when family issues resurface unexpectedly. But this time, instead of panic or anger, I feel curious about what Dad might have wanted to say to me after all these years. Emma, did the lawyer say anything else about the letter? Just that it was sealed and marked to be delivered to you only if you were willing to receive it. There's no pressure, Sarah. You can say no if you don't want to deal with it. I tell Emma I'll think about it and call her back in a few days. That night, David and I discuss whether there's any value in reading a letter from someone who hurt me so deeply, particularly now that he's dead, and there's no possibility of further communication or resolution. What's the worst thing that could happen if you read it? David asks. I guess the worst thing would be if it contained more manipulation, or attempts to make me feel guilty for my choices. But honestly, I think I'm strong enough now to handle that without it affecting me too much. And what's the best thing that could happen? Maybe it would provide some closure, or help me understand his perspective, or even just confirm that I made the right choices by protecting myself. After several days of consideration, I decide to ask Emma to have the lawyer send me the letter. When it arrives the following week, I wait until the children are asleep, and David is home before opening it, wanting to have support available if I need it. Dad's letter is shorter than I expected, just 2 handwritten pages, but it contains more genuine accountability than I ever received from him while he was alive. Sarah, the letter begins. I know I have no right to ask for your attention or your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, and how my choices destroyed our family. I've spent the last 10 years thinking about that night when you confronted us at the hotel, and I've finally accepted that you were right about everything. The letter goes on to acknowledge the fraud he committed by forging my signature, the financial theft that continued for years without my knowledge, and the emotional manipulation that had characterized our family dynamics long before the insurance situation. I realize now that we raised you to be our solution to every problem, but we never saw you as a person with your own needs and dreams. We took your generosity for granted and resented you for having the success that we wanted, but were never willing to work for. You deserved better from all of us, especially from me as your father. Dad's letter also addresses Tyler's actions and his own role in creating the family environment that led to such destructive behavior. I know that Tyler made his own choices, but I also know that he learned from our family that it was acceptable to use you as our financial backup plan. I taught him that by example, and I'm sorry for the role I played in creating the situation that led to such devastating consequences for everyone. The final paragraph of the letter contains something I never expected from my father, a genuine apology without conditions or expectations. I'm not writing this letter because I want you to forgive me or contact me. I'm writing because you deserve to know that someone from your original family finally understands the truth of what happened and takes responsibility for it. I hope you've been able to build a life that honors who you really are, and I hope you've found the kind of family that appreciates your worth. You were always the best of us, Sarah, and losing you was the consequence of our own failures, not yours. Reading Dad's letter brings tears to my eyes, not because it changes anything about our relationship or my decision to maintain distance, but because it provides the acknowledgement I needed to hear but never expected to receive. For the first time, someone from my original family had seen and validated my experience without asking for anything in return. I share the letter with David, who reads it quietly and then wraps me in a long hug. How does it feel to finally hear that from him? It feels like closure, I say, surprised by the truth of that statement. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear someone from my family say that I was right to protect myself, that their treatment of me was wrong, that I deserved better. Are you glad you read it? Yes, I think I am. It doesn't change the past or make up for what happened, but it helps me understand that Dad did grow and change, even if that growth came too late to save our relationship. That night, I have the most peaceful sleep I've experienced on October 15th in 10 years. For the first time since the fire, this anniversary date doesn't feel heavy with unresolved trauma. Instead, it feels like a marker of transformation, a reminder of how far I've traveled from the confused and betrayed daughter I was a decade ago. The next morning, I wake up early and spend time in my art studio, adding the final touches to the painting Elena and I have been working on together. The combination of dark blues and grays, with unexpected touches of gold, has evolved into something beautiful and meaningful, a visual representation of how difficult experiences can create space for unexpected growth and joy. As I step back to look at the completed painting, I realize that it perfectly captures my understanding of the past decade. The dark areas aren't ugly or something to be avoided, they're necessary parts of the composition that make the bright areas more luminous and meaningful. Without the darkness, the light wouldn't have the same impact. Elena and Marcus burst into the studio as I'm cleaning my brushes, both of them excited to see the finished painting. "It's beautiful, Mama," Elena exclaims. "The shiny parts look like stars." "Like the stars we see outside," Marcus adds, though his words are still somewhat unclear at 2 years old. "You're both right," I tell them, pulling them close. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from mixing light and dark together. As we head inside for breakfast, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for the life I've built from the ashes of my original family. Elena and Marcus will grow up knowing that they're valued for who they are, not what they can provide. They'll learn that healthy love supports independence and growth, not dependence and obligation. They'll understand that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, even when those boundaries are difficult or misunderstood. Most importantly, they'll know that they have the power to choose who they consider family, and that those choices should be based on mutual respect and genuine love, rather than guilt, obligation, or biological connection. The daughter who once disappeared into everyone else's story has finally written her own story, and it's a story worth telling. It's a story about the courage to choose yourself, the strength to build something new from the rubble of what was lost, and the wisdom to understand that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we create. 10 years later, I'm no longer the woman who woke up to discover her family's betrayal. I'm the woman who chose healing over hatred, growth over resentment, and love over obligation.
I'm the mother who broke generational cycles of dysfunction and built something beautiful in their place. I'm Sarah Mitchell Rodriguez, artist, mother, wife, and author of my own story, and this story finally has a happy ending. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.